Hello everybody, this is Kyle with Pixelwave, and today we're going to texture an asset in Substance Painter. So I want to start this off with a big thank you to another artist. Someone I've been able to have, or had the pleasure of working with is someone by the name of Oasim Karmieh. He's an artist based out of Romania. Sorry if I butchered the name, Oasim. Uh, Yes, artist based out of Romania. Amazing dude, great to work with. Just a master at what he does. He has a Gumraod with some tutorials. Most recently was this trench coat tutorial. A lot of Marvelous Designer into ZBrush. And then recently did a bag. I ended up reaching out to him, just kind of jokingly said, oh, you know, the things I would do to that in Substance Painter. And he gave it to me. He gave me the bag to play with. So a big thank you to Oasim. Go ahead and check out not only his Gumroad, but also the guy makes toys, designer toys. And they're killer. They're super killer. So check out his stuff. Again, thank you for the asset to allow us to play around with Substance Painter today. So part one, what do we need to do in part one? We need to get all the assets, high and low, into 3ds Max. We need to make sure we rename everything so that Substance Painter knows when we're doing bakes which is the low poly mesh and which is the high poly mesh. We need to make sure UVs are cool. I know that Oasim went ahead and UV'd everything prior to giving them to me, which I appreciate. Saves me some steps, but we'll go over just to check those out and make sure they're all good. And then we need to apply our materials appropriately and then export the meshes. So let's take a look. What I ended up getting from him was 2 sets of OBJs. So a bunch of these low poly OBJs and then the high poly OBJs. What he does is he works within Marvelous Designer, gets everything kind of looking good structurally, throws it into ZBrush, and then adds all these amazing details. So actually, let's look at this here. If I just pull up the high poly mesh, oops, these are all hidden still, I believe. Yeah, there we go. Okay. So creates it in Marvelous Designer and then comes back and adds all these like sweet little wrinkles and things. It just kind of give us this detail. Now, this is a really dense mesh. If I turn to wireframe, look at that. So this would be cool if it was a hero shot and this was maybe a product render. However, it just slows down Max in the long run. What we can do is take all this great information, like see, look at this, all this tugging happening in the buttons. Take all this information and bake it over to our low poly version, which is a lot less dense and a lot easier to manage once in Max. So we import everything over. I got everything imported over, and I separated or organized it into a low poly group and a high poly group with layers. And then from there, we need to go ahead and name all these models. So everything in the low poly, like these buckles, for instance, we need to name them buckles or whatever it is, underscore low. And this is the most important thing, a very important thing that we need to remember is this underscore low and underscore high, especially with capitalization or lack of, to tell Substance Painter that this is buckles, the low poly version of the buckles, and this is the high poly version of the buckles. So we've got to go through and organize everything. So every low poly version should have a high poly version. It should all be spelt the same, obviously capitalization all the same. Get everything all organized. And what we end up doing is we end up exporting a low poly version and a high poly version of this model and bake them all within Substance Painter's bakers. So after getting everything imported, we need to rename everything high and low. From there, did I miss this? Oh, yes, we did. Look at this. So let's rename this guy. This needs to be high. Glad I caught that. Okay. So we're good. Next thing, UV preparation. Substance Painter with the Baker prefers UVs that are up and down, left and right, very linear. So if we take a look at this, this is a good example. Now, oh God. Okay. One thing to keep in mind, this isn't a very good pack. So we have a lot of this dead or wasted space. So if we look at this here, look at all this wasted space in here. Now this is not ideal. We want to make sure that we're packing these UVs in like 100%. So they're covering from left to right and up and down, like just this whole area packed. Like I think the stitches are like that. Let me look at the stitches here. If I can select it. Yeah. So look at this. Look how packed these are. So this is great. This is a great example of how we want our UVs. Now it's a little easier because these UVs are small. You know, the stitches are really teeny, so we can pack them in really easily. Where on this guy, these straps, we've had to cut them. Like there's some seams probably underneath. Yep, some seams where they're hidden, so that they're not so long. We may have to cut them up another time, which we'd end up just going in here just to show you guys. And I do a split on this. So I cut it in half. Now, ideally, we'd want to make sure this cut was in an area where nobody else was going to see it, and then we repack them. So let me just show you guys real quick. This is obviously without taking into consideration where this seam is, but maybe I can do another tutorial for you guys on UVing. So if I cut all these up, what I'm virtually doing is just cutting all these UV shells in half. The nice thing is the Substance Painter is very forgiving, especially with triplanar textures on seams, and there's easy ways to hide them. So if I take all this, let's see if I can pack this in a little better. We'll say, oops, I need to click this, and we'll say rotate, yep. And default, I think it's 0.02. I like to go 0.7, and I think by default these are turned off, rotate clusters and fill holes, but turn those on, and we should get a little better of a pack. Nah, not really. So still, it's having a hard time kind of getting these filled in. And I think maybe this is the issue, so let's try this guy. Let's cut this guy up, see if we can get it even smaller. It's obviously not ideal to be making these cuts without understanding where the seam is, but just to show you guys real quick here, let's try it again. Yeah, so see, there was that extra long one that was on the left. Now we're taking up more of this one-to-one space, they call it. Anything that's doesn't have a UV shell on it. So if I highlight this, all this area, all this is wasted information basically. So the tighter the pack, the better. And we need to make sure that everything is UV'd. I know with the newest release of Substance Painter, which I need to re-up my subscription, has UVs that are automatically done. However, automatic UVs are convenient, but they're not great. So actually a good example of this is the bag. So check this out. Again, we're looking for left and right, up and down UVs. We don't always get it, but something like this bag is not the end of the world. However, we can run into issues with baking things like ambient occlusion. What ends up happening here, if I can show you guys, anything that's not linear, say to a blue plane, anything that's not a straight line like this is perfect. We get these crosses or this like 45-degree angle. When the pixels are getting set up, you get this stepping that happens in Substance Painter that goes all the way down. It looks jagged. It doesn't look smooth. So again, we want to make sure the asset has proper UVs, that it's taking up as much of the one-to-one space as possible, and that we have everything up and down and left and right, just to make sure the bake is nice and clean for us as an end result. So yeah, UV preparation, we need UVs on everything, and I've gone ahead and made sure that we had that again. Oasim ended up making UVs in ZBrush for us. I think I might have just cleaned up a couple of them there. So what else? Apply materials. So we need materials to everything in the scene. What this is doing is it's telling Substance Painter that this bag is going to be on its own UV space. So if we look here, this is going to be its own texture set. So when we export the textures, we'll have one set of textures that's just for the bag. And the way we tell Substance Painter this is by applying a material to it. So this bag, the main portion of the bag, has a material named Duffel bag. And then something like this has straps assigned to it. And then I think this is called handles. Yep, handles there. And then we have zipper, which is here. And then we have stitches. Yeah, stitches there. So what is this? Oh yeah, and then we have another one for buckles. So each material that we assign is going to tell Substance Painter it deserves its own texture set. And then what we'll end up having is 6 individual texture sets that we export. Now we could put all of this into one UV space, into one one-to-one space. So instead of the bag having its own texture set here, the entire bag, everything, all of it would share this one-to-one space, and it would share only one material. The downside to doing that is everything is popped into one 4K or 8K texture set. There can be some positives to that, like if you're doing something real low poly and you want to have a low poly bag kind of sitting in the corner and it's not going to be very close to the camera. We don't need a lot of detail. It can be all in one texture set. But if we're going something for like a product render, we want to part everything out and have like the bag be in 4K, you know, the straps be in 2K, something like the stitches can be, you know, in 1K or 512 just because they're so teeny. But it gives us a large amount of detail. So something to keep in mind, it's a case-by-case basis. In this case, I parted everything out because I want the most amount of detail. So again, if we have, and actually maybe I can do this to show you guys. There's that. And so each one of these colors gets its own textures. Oops. Yeah, this will be cool for you guys to see. Buckles. Let's do this orangish. And stitches. We'll make it black. And then what was this one? Zipper. We'll leave it gray. So yeah, each one of these colors is its own texture. So we'll have 6 different texture sets that we'll have to pipe back in, allowing for lots and lots of detail. So that's that. And then exporting meshes. Really easy. So now that we have everything all set up and taken care of, what we need to do is export stuff out. So I'm going to highlight just the low poly bag. We're going to say export selection. I'm going to go to my working file, which is Duffel bag, and we're going to say, actually I have it exported from another run through, Duffel bag _ low. So again, this is the low poly version. We're going to say save that out. This is where if we had cameras, we can include cameras in this, because I know Substance Painter has support for that. I can show you guys a tutorial on that, but I think Substance Painter or Substance or Algorithmic has that covered. So then we take the high poly version. Now, the high poly version, we do not need to apply materials, nor do we need to make sure we have UVs. It's just going to be referencing the mesh at the time that we bake within Substance Painter. So this can just be the raw file that we end up saying file, export, and we'll do the same version. So Duffel bag _ high to tell Substance Painter this is the high poly version. This is going to take a second to export out. So I will just let it process and we'll see you guys on the other side.